All right, everybody, welcome back. And we're going to do our last bouncing ball assignment. We're essentially going to be creating a ball with a tail. We're going to be doing the typical bouncing ball inside of a nested cymbal, but then we're going to add a tail, secondary action or overlapping action. So let's just start. Start by creating a new file. Full HD 1920, 24 frames per second. Create. Okay, double click the hand to bring the stage into full view and draw a ball. Purple's fine, actually. And I'm going to take the stroke off. So no stroke, purple fill. Okay, and hold the shift key. And like I said, I like to add some shading and lighting. Highlight that lower portion, a darker purple, curve it down, get my brush, paint normal, and add a little bit of a highlight. Cool. Selection tool, V on the keyboard, highlight the object, F8 on the keyboard, make it a graphic symbol. Purple ball. Click OK. All right. Immediately nest the purple ball. So F8 again. Nested, bouncing, purple ball. So we know what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to do the bouncing inside this nest. Okay, I'm going to make it bounce straight up and down like we've been doing this whole time. All right, so now double click to go inside this symbol to do the animation. There we go. Now inside nested bouncing purple ball. And it's in here that I'm going to do my bounce. So I'm just going to tween this one, use my classic tween. So let me just zoom out a little touch. Control minus. All right, so this is all rough. On frame 10, I'll add a keyframe and drop the ball. Okay. Then 11, 12, I'll do a full squash and stretch. So Alt, squash, no Alt, stretch. Okay, and then I can just copy the frames. So Alt drag and Alt drag. And I have all my positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, highlight all the frames, right click in the frames, create the classic tween. We'll do some of the other tweens later on. We'll do the motion tween and we'll do the shape tween next. But here's my basic bounce. And then of course I want to add my easing in and easing out. So click on the first frame, -100 for the classic ease in. Okay, and then on this frame here, I'll add my ease out. So +100. Okay. And there's my loop. All right, so we've done that a couple times already. So that's good. That ball is done. I'm happy with that bounce. Now I want to add my tail. And so this is how you start building more complex animation. Is you start with your simple animation, in this case the bouncing ball, and now I can come back in and add my tail or other appendages or a face or whatever I wanted to do. In this case, just simply a tail because it illustrates a lot of techniques. So add a layer, tail, and just like I did on the zoom, if you weren't there for the zoom, that's okay. Just like I did on the zoom, I'm going to show you just one method. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right one, but it's just one. So I'm going to get my line tool, and I'm going to set my stroke a little thicker. Let's see what a stroke of 10 looks like. A little thin for my liking. Let's go up to like 20. That looks good. I like that. Maybe still a little thick. Let's go down to like 16. There, better. All right, so one thing I needed like an anchor point. We did that last time, so I actually want to unlock that ball, go back in, and draw in an anchor point somewhere. In this case, I'm just going to use an oval with no stroke, and I'm going to pick a really sort of obnoxious color so you can really, really see it. So I'm going to just draw a circle, a little tiny yellow circle, and just drop it. And let's just say that is the anchor point where I want to attach my tail to. So I'm making it really big and obvious. You wouldn't normally do that with a character or with your animation. You want to make it less obvious than that, but I really want to make it obvious so you can see it. All right, so come back outside of purple ball, and as you can see, the yellow spot follows and squashes and stretches. So you can always go back in and modify graphics if you need to. Okay, lock that layer again, go back to the tail layer, and again, I want to put in a line starting at that center point and then just drawing a straight line. Okay, now what is your tail going to be made of? Mine is going to be kind of like a rubbery noodle kind of thing. So I'm going to put a little curve in it and put it in a starting position. Okay, that looks roughly okay. And then basically I just keyframe it and eyeball it the whole time. So F6, add a keyframe, and then just start to, as the ball starts to fall, just sort of try to imagine how the tail will change. Now because it's elastic, I want it to stretch a little bit. So F6, and as you'll notice, the anchor point moves, so I have to keep repositioning the tail on the anchor point. And you only have to get it close. All right, so I'm going to start to straighten out my line, and then I just simply keep keyframing it. F6, add another keyframe, and this is the only way that you can do this. You basically can't really tween this well. Okay, so that tail is going to start to straighten out a little bit as it gets pulled down by the weight of the ball. See? And make sure you're scrubbing regularly so that you can see the action for yourself. You'll see old video or film of animators flipping pages back and forth. That's essentially what you're doing. You're essentially flipping pages back and forth like the animators would have done in the olden days. But you don't need to do that anymore, thankfully. Okay, all right. And then really you just have to sort of try to figure out how to make this happen. Okay, it looks good, and I just keep going. Keep adding keyframes, making those changes. Okay, and rather than try and fix this curve here, I'm just going to chop it off. And that's why I like to do this assignment using this kind of tail, just using a line, because it's so easy to manipulate, and it looks really good. Okay, coming along, coming along. Now the ball's going to fall down, starting to pick up speed. So you'll notice that the anchor point moves further and further each time, and I'm just adding a little stretch to give the viewer a sense of what the material my tail is made up out of. Okay, so the next few keyframes are going to be relatively easy because we're just going to be moving the tail down. Okay, 6. And I'm just using my arrow keys to move it down. And I might even start to shorten the tail a little bit as the tail starts to catch up with the ball. Okay, remember, what's the material? All right, looks really nice. Keep going. F6. All right. And I believe we're about to hit the ground. So we hit the ground now. I'm going to shorten that just a tiny little bit more. Okay. Okay, beautiful. And now it's going to start to squash and stretch. Okay, the ball starts to squash, so the anchor point changes vertically and horizontally. And now, because there's not a lot of time between the squashing and stretching, I have to move that tail pretty quick as far as slapping it on the ground. Okay, so next one is going to be pretty much fully slapped on the ground. Just about. Okay. Okay, and then the next keyframe is going to be as the tail whips down and hits the ground, like zo. And then it just kind of starts to go back up in the air really quickly. And like I said, there's really no other way to do this than the keyframe. All right, so now there's going to be some drag as the tail kind of gets dragged along the ground. So it'll stretch a little bit. See how it's kind of dragging along the ground? And as the ball pulls it back up in the air. 6. I'll leave that tail on the ground and just reattach the anchor point. And create a little bit of a nice curve there. And then pull this in just a little bit, not much. Because again, it's elastic, remember? It'll catch up later. Cool. All right. Keeps going back up. Moving pretty quick. All right, now we're almost vertical completely. Might want to just hack off that little awkward bit at the bottom. All right, the next few frames are going to be, again, fairly easy as it just goes straight up in the air. Use my arrow keys to reattach. All right, and I might just hack off tiny little bits as the elastic starts to pull back in. And this really is an art, not necessarily a science. I mean, you can make it fairly scientific if you measure everything, but I'm not really measuring everything. I'm just eyeballing it very quickly. Okay, keep adding keyframes. Like I said, this is the easy one. Okay, so the ball's really slowing down now, so I can shorten that up as much as possible. And then it starts to curve up just a little bit as the ball slows. There we go. Keep adding keyframes. Reattach the anchor point first, and then start to curve up. A little bit of foreshortening there. Okay, a little bit more. As that tail starts to whip up and comes back to almost first position. And then try to get it roughly where that starting position was. And that takes you roughly. And I'm just pressing the enter key here. Beautiful. All right. So now that I've done this, I know that I have my 24 frame sequence, a 1 second bounce. I can come back to my main timeline and make it bounce for the amount of times I need it to bounce. So I'll zoom out a touch, maybe put the ball off to the side. And let's say I want it to bounce, let's say 8 seconds, 8 times essentially. So I can just stretch out the timeline, add a keyframe, and slide the ball over, highlight the frames, right click, classic tween. And that looks great. All right, that's your next project. Please make a nested bouncing ball with a tail. And you can use keyframes, all keyframes if you choose to. You can tween if you like, but essentially this is the basis for a lot of other projects. If you can make this work, then you can make just about anything work that your imagination comes up with as far as 2D animation is concerned, especially with cycles of animations. Other things are a little bit more difficult, but there you go. All right, thanks, and see you in the next video.